Welcome to my views and news. Viewers, we have received exclusive information about ongoing talks between Ethiopian government and a delegation of the IMF, International Monetary Fund. Ethiopian government is in dire need of immediate loans, grants, debt rescheduling, and for that loans to be released, for those grants to be released, Ethiopia will have to make some compromises, some hard pills to swallow for Ethiopia in coming days. What is happening at the talks? What does US want? We must not forget, we should have no doubt that behind the IMF there is US. Without US approval, Ethiopia can get nothing from the IMF or World Bank. So, what we have learned through some sources is that there could be a good news for Ethiopia and a bad news as well. What is the good news? What is the bad news? Uh, Firstly, IMF wants to ensure that China gives some relief to Ethiopia. Ethiopia owes 19 billion US dollars to China. If China does not reschedule debt which Ethiopia owes to China, or the interest, it means Ethiopia won't be able to pay back both loans, Chinese loan and IMF. So that is why IMF wants to ensure that Ethiopia convinces China to reschedule the debt which Ethiopia owes to China. And we have seen meetings. Recently, Ahmed Shide was in China. What does China want? Nothing is free in international affairs, viewers. Countries are friends because they have some common interests. China wants some contracts in mining sector, Ethiopian mining sector, gold mining sector. China wants contract for an airport being constructed by Ethiopian Airlines. And China wants contracts for raw materials and favorable conditions for Chinese companies working in Ethiopia. Talks underway. So far, China has not restructured Ethiopian debt. Let's see. IMF hopes that China might agree to Ethiopian request of rescheduling. What does US want before release of financial aid bailout package for Ethiopia? US wants assurance from Ethiopia that Ethiopia won't interfere with the work of UN Human Rights Council, which formed an inquiry commission more than a year ago to inquire into human rights abuses committed during the 2-year-long Tigray war in Tigray, Amhara, Afar regions. Ethiopian government has been opposing this commission since day one. And a few days ago at UN Human Rights Council session, Ethiopia was planning to table a resolution to put an end to the mandate of the UN Inquiry Commission. But some talks were held between US and Ethiopia and EU countries, and Ethiopia agreed to drop its bid for terminating the mandate of UN Inquiry Commission. And reportedly, an understanding has been reached that in September, when Commission's mandate will be expired, the mandate will not be renewed, though nothing has been seen, agreed in black and white. Reportedly, an understanding has been reached, but Ethiopia dropped its bid at Human Rights Council. It means that one of the first demands of US has been met by Ethiopia, that Ethiopia should not interfere with the work of UN Human Rights Council. Secondly, US wants Ethiopia to sign a legally binding agreement about GERD, Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Egypt wants a legally binding agreement with Ethiopia over GERD. Egypt and Sudan. Ethiopia has been opposing the signing of the agreement. Ethiopia says it is ready to share data regarding dam operations. Several rounds of talks have been held, mediated by some countries, mediated and led by African Union as well, but nothing has happened. But we have seen that Egypt is now building pressure upon Ethiopia. Egypt is involving Arab countries. Arab League a few days ago adopted a resolution asking Ethiopia to sign a legally binding agreement, and Egypt is a key US ally. So that is why US wants Ethiopia to sign a legally binding agreement with Egypt and Sudan. Second condition laid out by the US for these loans and grants. Thirdly, US wants Ethiopia to resolve internal armed conflicts in Ethiopia. That is why we're seeing that progress is being made. Peace deal with the Tigray fighters signed in November last year, Pretoria Agreement. Then in Benishangul Gumuz region and Gambela regional states, we have seen that peace agreements have been signed. In Amhara region, talks underway between Amhara regional government and Argo fighters. In Oromian, talks going to start between Oromo Liberation Army and Ethiopian government. All these engagements between regional governments, federal government, and armed groups in Ethiopia are linked to US demand. US wants all these internal issues resolved. These are three main conditions laid out by the US for approval of bailout for Ethiopia. Now, progress is being made. Ethiopia is badly in need of this bailout package. Why? Because foreign exchange reserves are very low, value of bird declining fast, foreign investment decreasing, AGWA suspended, not restored so far. And at this crucial time, China is not going to help Ethiopia in terms of bailout package. China can only reschedule its debt which Ethiopia owes to China. That is what Ethiopia is hoping to get from China. No bailout from China. So it means that Ethiopia will have to make some compromises in coming days. Ethiopia is already making some compromise in the form of swift resolution of conflicts in the country, in the form of other demands like non-interference in the work of Human Rights Council. What will Ethiopia get if talks succeed between Ethiopia and IMF? Around 12 to 15 billion US dollars over a period of around 8 to 10 years. And this bailout package will include loans, grants for restructuring of destroyed infrastructure in Tigray, Amhara, Afar regions, and loan restructuring. And since This bailout package, the aid will be given gradually, loans over a period of around 8 to 10 years. It means Ethiopia will have to make concessions. And 2.83 billion US dollars were approved by the IMF for Ethiopia before the start of conflicts. This money will also be approved, released for Ethiopia if talks succeed. Now, you see that financial aid, loans, grants released by world powers are linked to international affairs, to international politics. Through giving loans and grants, foreign powers want their agendas to be implemented. No one is a friend or an enemy in international affairs. It's not that China is a friend and US is an enemy. No, countries' relations are based on their interests. Ethiopia it has been pushed against the wall because of the war. 2 year long war has destroyed Ethiopian economy. Ethiopia is in dire need of financial aid for implementation of peace deal as well, for reconstruction. How will Ethiopia meet all these challenges without support from the West, from the US, and from China? Either Ethiopia will have to make very tough decisions, which Ethiopians won't be able to tolerate because they're already faced with multiple challenges: hunger, inflation, unemployment, rising food prices. If people are put under more burden in Ethiopia, it would be difficult for them to survive. That is why government will have to make compromises on some policy national issues. We could see start of talks between Ethiopia and Egypt, Sudan over GERD in coming days. And if this IMF bailout package is implemented, it means for the next 8 to 10 years, US and EU will have tremendous influence in Ethiopia. They'll be able to twist Ethiopian arm, and Ethiopia will have to agree to their demands. Let's see what happens. Thank you for watching.